Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm back to break down this Game 6 World Series MLB DFS Showdown slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Before we get into it, if you could hit that subscribe button and hit that like button, I would greatly appreciate it. And in return, I am going to provide you value and break down these MLB slates and DFS slates in general, give you some game strategy, give you some ideas as to how we can be successful, and then just give you a breakdown of how you can leverage the field, what's going to surpass you past other people, and then strategies in different game modes on the slates, such as cash or tournaments. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start breaking down the slate today. Today we have Mr. Blake Snell taking on Tony Gonsolin in the starting pitching matchup. Game 6 matchup where the Rays have to win to stay alive, so I'm sure that they're going to be willing to go to anyone and everyone in the pen. But breaking down the two starting pitchers today, we have Blake Snell first. He has a 31% K rate, a 15% swing strike rate. The ground ball, the fly ball stuff's great against right-handed hitting. He has a 51.1% ground ball rate, 25.5 fly ball rate, 27.6% K rate. So righties, it bumps up to a 42.6% K rate. So he's really, really dominant against left-handed hitting when it comes to the strikeout category. And then when it comes to Tony Gonsolin, not nearly as good, really. The ground ball and the fly ball stuff's not nearly as good. The strikeout rate's not as high. His hard hit rate's better and his walk rate's better, but other than that, I mean, his K rate's better against right-handed hitting, and the WOBA, the hard, and the slugging. So, Gonsolin definitely has an edge against right-handed hitting. And then against lefties, the ground ball and the fly ball stuff's really bad, and the K rate's not quite as good. I will say something to mention about Gonsolin is the first time that he went out there and pitched, Roberts had a really short string on him. I don't remember exactly how many innings he pitched, but I think he literally may have gone in 2/3, I believe. And then they yanked him right away. When looking at the Vegas lines, you can see that the Dodgers have a 4.36 implied run total compared to the Rays' 3.64 implied run total. So Vegas does like the Dodgers to get the win here. But like I had mentioned with Tony Gonsolin, I don't really know that I want to go there because we've already seen Dave Roberts have a quick yank on him out of the ball game. So compared to a guy like Blake Snell, who has a lot more upside, we may want to go there. And then it's important to mention that on FanDuel, we don't even have to play starting pitching. So this is something that refers strictly to DraftKings as I'm talking about it here. As far as both of these teams and their ability to hit, if you look at my team hitting data sheet, we can see that the Los Angeles Dodgers, we'll start with the Rays actually because they're right here. The Rays have a 26% K rate, 192 WOBA, 329 ISO. The slugging is a 431, 298 BABIP, pretty solid across the board. Against right-handed pitching, they have a 25.5% K rate. Specifically when taking on Gonsolin today, we're going to be looking at that. The ISO is a 183, 423 slugging, 324 WOBA. And they do strike out less against righties, so something to keep in mind there. When it comes to the Dodgers, something I think that's interesting is when they're taking on lefties, they're not quite as good. I mean, they're a Dodgers lineup that's absolutely stacked. I think we all know that by now. 20.8% K rate, 219 WOBA, 347 ISO, 476 slugging. The fly ball and the hard hit rate's great. Against righties, they're green across the board. I mean, this is a color-coded data sheet comparing them to the rest of the lineups across the league and, weighing in the results of others, and the Green's the best of the best, and the Dodgers are the best of the best, pretty much in every category against right-handed pitching. But then we go against lefties, who they are taking on tonight in Blake Snell, and it's not quite as appealing. 21.6% K rate, a 318 WOBA, a 156 ISO, 398 slugging, a 284 BABIP. Not quite as impressive. They're still great. They're the Dodgers, but when you go against lefties, they have a higher strikeout rate, and they're not quite as good in the slugging department. So just something to keep in mind there when we're breaking down the slate and the game theory. And then when we're looking at the bullpens, color-coded data sheet, once again, breaking down everyone in the league. I've pulled aside the Dodgers and Rays to get a quick look at how they perform, and it's green across the board. So as far as targeting these bullpens and having an edge there, I don't really think there is one. So yeah, a little quick breakdown of both the teams there. And next, I think we should get into pitch data. Something that I like to look at when picking the hitters in my lineups, throughout the year, but especially on showdown slates, I think you can really dig into the pitch data and figure out who performs best against what pitch. So first, starting with these Tampa Bay Rays, who I had already mentioned will be taking on Tony Gonsolin. who throws a 93.64 mile an hour fastball on average, about 47% of the time to lefties and 46% of the time to right-handed hitting. So that's in the 92 to 94 mile an hour range. And when breaking down that range, we can see that the Rays do have a lot of guys that perform very well against that pitch. Austin Meadows with a 238 ISO with a 444 WOBA. Brandon Lau is the guy that took him deep the first time we had broken down the slate, and it makes sense because he has a 682 ISO, 675 WOBA against that pitch. That is ridiculously good. And that's over 16 batted ball events, so that's a pretty decent sample size. Randy Arozarena crushes the pitch, but we're only dealing with 3 batted ball events, but he's got a 750 ISO with a 701 WOBA. G-Man Choi, good in the contact, but not so much in the power. I don't really know if we want to go there. Joey Wendell looks pretty good with a 255 ISO, 293 WOBA, not quite as good at the contact category, but he can definitely slug and get some power into the pitch. Kiermaier with a 245 ISO, and then Mike Zunino with a 326 ISO. So, when breaking down these slates, if you're playing the big prize pools, guys, I've gone over this, but it's important to note, we have 35,750 people in this contest. When picking guys that we want to play, if we're looking at the prize payout format for FanDuel, it's $100,000 the first and then $20,000 the second. Drops down to $80K real quick. And you're competing against 35,749 other people. So we're going to want to play lineups where we get contrarian, because if you're playing all the high-owned guys, sorry to tell you, but you're probably not going to end up as the only one with that first place prize. And then the same rule applies to DraftKings. Full contest details, there's 29,411 people in this big contest with 100K to first. You got to beat, 29,400 people around that range. And if you want the $100,000 prize to first, you're probably going to want to get different. So as far as I'm concerned, when looking at, how these guys break down, you could definitely play some guys at the bottom of the lineup. Joey Wendell, Kevin Kiermaier, Mike Zunino, all grade out very well against Gonzalez and stuff. Randy Arozarena and Brandon Lau, Austin Meadows all grade out. And then I'd probably fade the middle of the lineup in G-Man Choi, Manuel Margot, and Willie Adames. However, with that being said, we did mention that Roberts had a quick pull on Gonzalez early in the game, so they might be going to the bullpen fairly early. Unfortunately, we cannot break that down in our analysis. We could take a guess at who they're going to bring out of the bullpen, but it's not like there's a long reliever listed. Maybe a guy like Julio Urias, who's a guy that's been getting innings, but we don't know. We really don't know. Unless I see news on that later in the day, which, then I can tweet out and help you guys out with that. But I don't see anything that's really pointing to a particular long reliever. Next pitch that Gonzalez throws is the splitter. And that's a pitch that, unfortunately, we really can't collect a lot of data on because it's not a very common pitch. And I will say that every single hitter in the lineup sucks against it when it comes to what they've performed so far. So it's not really like I'm getting excited to target anyone there. And lastly, he throws a slider to right-handed hitting about 25% of the time. So, that's the next pitch that he throws the most. And when looking at the righties in this lineup, I don't see a single one that performs well against it outside of Mike Zunino, who has a 280 ISO, 282 WOBA. And I had mentioned, we want to play low-owned guys in the bottom of the order on these showdown slates to get unique. And I do think that Mike Zunino grades out very well in this matchup. So he's a guy that I would have interest in. He's kind of an all-or-nothing hitter where he just swings for the fences every single time. But, that's what we're looking for in these tournaments. We want low ownership and we want guys that can hit home runs. So definitely like Mike Zunino. Moving on over to the Los Angeles Dodgers hitters and their matchup against Blake Snell today. We can see that Blake Snell throws a 95.5 mile an hour fastball on average, so he's in the 94 to 96 mile an hour range. And when looking at who performs the best against that pitch, we have Mookie Betts with a 308 ISO, a 429 WOBA, very impressive for him. Justin Turner has a 296 ISO, 427 WOBA, very good. Max Muncy with a 400 ISO, Will Smith with a 400 ISO, Cody Bellinger with a 226, and Chris Taylor with a 296. And then we got to go over to our my pitching data sheet that I always like to refer to, because when we're looking at Blake Snell's stats on the year, it's important to keep in mind we had mentioned he does give up a 420 slugging to right-handed hitting, and to lefties he gives up a 457 slugging. So he's actually kind of struggled against both bats as far as the slugging category is concerned. However, I will say that he has a 42.6% K rate to lefties compared to a 27.6% K rate to righties. So he does strike out left-handed hitting much more frequently. So these righties are really the ones that I want to target. And then as far as Tony Gonsolin's concerned, we had kind of skimmed over him real quick, and I would prefer the left-handed bats against him because he has a 33.3% ground ball rate and a 44.4% fly ball rate to left-handed hitting. So the lefties are definitely going to get the ball elevated. However, it's not like he does much better against righties. So I think we got pretty overall with Gonsolin. I feel like we can just attack the guys that profile well against him pitch-wise. So keep that in mind when it comes to him. But yeah, I mean, these are the guys that profile well against Blake Snell. As far as the righties, I said we prefer the righties. So we want Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, Chris Taylor. I really like. Chris Taylor was a guy that I was extremely high on in the first game. I said, get Chris Taylor in your lineups. He was hitting in the 9 spot. I loved him. I think that when the official lineup came out, he actually got bumped up to the 8th spot, but he was projected to hit in the 9. And he went on there and hit a bomb. And I do think that this is, this could be a deja vu spot because when breaking down Blake Snell's secondary pitch to right-handed hitting, well, he's got a couple. First is the changeup, second is the curveball. So we'll go to the changeup real quick. Mookie Betts hits that pitch great. Justin Turner, not quite as much. AJ Pollock crushes the pitch, and then Chris Taylor once again. So Chris Taylor is the reason. I mean, it's the same matchup I had broken down, but when he's facing Blake Snell, he really profiles well. And then lastly, the curveball, who Justin Turner has a 214 ISO against, very good. Chris Taylor doesn't perform quite as good against that pitch, and then we have Enrique Hernandez with a 200 ISO. So Justin Turner and Enrique Hernandez are the curveball guys when it comes to hitting Blake's nasty curveball. So yeah, overall, the righties, and my favorites are Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, AJ Pollock, Chris Taylor, Enrique Hernandez, Will Smith. I mean, all the righties, but once again, keep in mind that we want to get contrarian, and that's when we're going to transition over to some lineup building. I'm going to walk you guys through some lineup building, what my thought process is as I'm building these lineups, and we will first start with FanDuel, who gives you a $7,000 per average salary with a $35,000 salary overall. As far as the format, we have an MVP slot where you get 2 times the points when you play the player in that slot, and we have a star slot where you get 1.5 times the points. So obviously the strategy is you want the highest scoring guy to be in your MVP slot, and you want the second highest guy to be in your 1.5x point slot, and then you want the third, the fourth, and the fifth highest to be in your utility. And I do think that it's very, very possible to do this with leaving a ton of salary on the board. It's baseball, guys, so anything can happen. I mean, these top guys are obviously nasty. They hit the top of the order. They're the top dogs in the lineup, but, it's not like it's impossible for them to hit 2 singles or even for the starting pitching to just want to pitch around them, walk them, and then the other guys get the big hit. So as far as a contrarian lineup, I want guys that profile well, but I also want guys that are going to be low on. So Chris Taylor's the guy that I was really high on last time. I'm going to be high on him again, to be honest with you guys. So the first guy that we're going to go ahead and throw in, who we were high on last time, he went up there and hit not the grand slam, but the home run, Brandon Lau. He's been cold throughout the postseason for the most part, but he profiles really well in this matchup. It worked out great last time. Second guy is going to be that in Chris Taylor. Same reasoning, but really, Chris Taylor is, I don't think, going to be very highly owned when it comes to the star slot or the MVP slot. So that's where I think it gets interesting, because if he's the guy that scores the most points in the slate, I don't see him being the highest owned. So it's really about where you play Chris Taylor. I'm not going to say he's going to be low owned in the utility slot because he's cheap and he does profile well and he does hit lefties well. So I would guess that he will be decently owned. It's just he probably won't be decently owned in the MVP and the star slot. So I would feel comfortable throwing him in there as a contrarian play. Throwing in AJ Pollock at the bottom of the order with him as well at 5K. Try not to use all of our salary. That leaves us with 8,250 on the board. We could throw in a Mike Zunino, who we're very high on at the bottom of the order as far as his capabilities with the matchup. And then lastly, 12K left on the table. We could throw in Mookie. I think throwing in Justin Turner strictly because he's cheaper. Not strictly because he's cheaper. He hits he profiles really well as well. We talked about he profiles really well against the left-handed pitcher, so we could throw him in there. That leaves us with 4,000 salary. I think that's going to be a contrarian lineup, and then you could always just remove Turner and put in a guy that's cheaper. I mean, Austin Meadows hits number 1 in the lineup, and he might be lower owned strictly because when people see that they have so much salary, they just want to use it all. So that leaves us with 5,500 salary left on the board. We have guys in our lineup that all profile well. I think that's a great lineup. So, that's the thought process as we're building these lineups on tonight's Showdown slate. These are things that you should be thinking about. And that's a great lineup overall. So that's our FanDuel lineup build like that. Moving on over to DraftKings. DraftKings is a little bit different because we can play pitching over here. And I had mentioned, I would definitely want to play Blake Snell before I play Tony Gonsolin. And I do think that Blake Snell offers the most upside on the slate. I mean, if you want to be contrarian, it might make sense not to play Blake Snell just because the starting pitching is probably going to be very highly owned because in general, I would say it stands out that they have the highest upside. However, when looking at the Vegas lines, the Dodgers have a 4.36 implied run total and the Rays have a 3.64 implied run total. So it's not like it's expected to be a very high scoring game. Both of these teams have really good pitching out of the bullpen. Both of these teams have a good starting pitcher going out there. I had mentioned Tony Gonsolin maybe having the short leash, but it's not like he's a pushover. Definitely not the worst pitcher we've seen this year. And he's starting a World Series game, so I think it speaks for itself that he's not terrible. But I'm definitely leaning Blake Snell. So we will start with Blake Snell in our captain spot. And then it's important to remember that on DraftKings in this captain spot or this king spot or whatever you want to call it, the price tags are inflated. So if you look at Blake Snell's price tag before the king spot, he's $11K, and then the king spot is $16.5K. So he is a lot more expensive, which might limit our bats, but I think he's expensive for good reason. He offers the most upside on the slate, being that he's a starting pitcher. He's the strikeout upside stuff. And definitely like Blake Snell today. And then we can just kind of throw in the same guys we were discussing. However, we have 6,700 average remaining in our lineup. So Joey Window profiled well. I like him. Chris Taylor profiled well. I like him. AJ Pollock profiled well. I like him. Kiki Hernandez is a guy that profiled well. I like him. And then we had discussed playing Mike Zunino, who we cannot get to anymore. And lower in salary, we might not be able to reach a starter here. So we might have to do some moving around real quick. Yeah, so I would probably want to drop down from AJ Pollock to Austin Meadows, which leaves us enough for Kiermaier or Mike Zunino, who both profiled well. So throw in either one, and I feel pretty good about that. The only thing left to mention, I would say, is we do have some pinch hit risk through both of these lineups. Enrique Hernandez is the pinch hit risk. AJ Pollock is a pinch hit risk because they have a guy like Jock Peterson that they can throw in if the Rays go to a righty. So just keep that in mind. And then as far as the Rays are concerned, Austin Meadows may be replaced by like a Hunter Renfroe. G-Man Choi could be replaced as well from like a Mike Brosseau. And that's just something to keep in mind there. So, last thing to mention I would say on the slate is, we do have those guys with some pinch hit risk. But if they go out there and they hit a home run their first at bat, you're not going to be too worried about that. So, I just want to put that disclaimer out there. If you're throwing a guy like Kiki Hernandez or a utility player or a guy that gets swapped out for other guys, and there are options on both teams that applies to for the Rays and the Dodgers. I just went down the main candidates real quick. But just don't be surprised. But also, it's a showdown slate. You need them to do their production early, and you need to just pick guys that you think are going to produce. However, with that being said, something that could be sneaky is maybe throwing in a guy that'll come off the bench. So maybe throwing in a Jock Peterson or a Hunter Renfroe for 5,500, and having them coming off the bench hit a home run. No one has them; they're low owned, and you could be looking at the big money. So I kind of saved that little sneaky play for last. So for those of you that stuck around, that's something you could definitely do, and it could definitely pay off big. If I'm playing a large sum of money and I have 150 lineups or something like that, I'm probably not playing them in much more than 5% of my lineups, 10% of my lineups, unless I want to get real risky. But just something to mention. I throw in a Hunter Renfroe. He comes in and he hits a pinch hit home run. I could be looking real good. Probably something you want to stick to if you're playing like one lineup in this 999 field. But if you're playing one lineup, I think it makes sense. I mean, you know, why not? It's going to give you the most leverage against the field probably, and if it pays off, it's probably going to pay off big for you. So a little strategy to leave you with there. So that is all from me on this Game 6 breakdown slate. I appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed the content and if I offered you any value throughout this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. Thank you for tuning in. And if the Rays pull off a win tonight, I will see you in the next video breaking down Game 7. I wish you all the best of luck tonight and have a good one.